We're going to cover the attitudes of three Gdolei Yisrael to pandemics. The Alter Rebbe, the Rabbi Akiva Eiger, and the Tzemach Tzedek. The Alter Rebbe was a shtetl lepeli, which is unknown what the disease was. Rabbi Akiva Eiger was in the year of, I'll tell you the story soon, but it was about cholera, and the Tzemach Tzedek was about typhus. The eitzes that they give are probably as relevant today as it was then, because they're mostly spiritual eitzes, and since the Olam is asking about what we should be doing, I figured last night that definitely looking at precedents of Gdolei Yisrael would be the way to go. I must say that it must have been really important to type this up, because everything that could happen on the computer and the printer happened wrong, and yet some. So a big yashikar to my wife that gives me. Virus. No, the computer didn't have a virus, but it had all kinds of other things. So you should know in general. I quote the Loshen Rav Mamish Ois v'Ois, and also the Maram HaKoimis. I make sure that this way, if you ever want to look anything up, the Maram HaKoimis are exact. Okay, so let's start with the Alter Rebbe. Excuse if I didn't spell the name of today's machla correctly. I called it Keser. The reason Keser, I'm not trying to make things about spiritual thing. You see that Gdolei Yisrael and other machlas also had. There's an expression in Yiddish like, just don't be a nasty fellow. Zanish ken cholera, right? So let me explain how the shtalshlus is. Cholera, the Gdolei Yisrael called it choy ra. Choy ra, they called it. Now, so if an expression Yiddish became to someone who was being obnoxious or something, zanish ken cholera, So you see that so anyway, so let's look at the three attitudes of Gdolei Yisrael and what they had to say about this. The first is the Alter Rebbe. Could you give it to Moshe? Yeah. The Alter Rebbe, there's in the Sefer Meir Shorim, which is a collection of letters from the Alter Rebbe, the Mittel Rebbe Tzemach Tzedek. There is a zettel that is signed by Rabbi Yehuda Leib, the son of the Tzemach Tzedek, to the community in Lepli. You heard of Rabbi Kaseh Lepler. To the community of Lepli, there was a machla mispashetis, and he writes to them, I'm giving you a little zettel that I have from Adoni Ov Zikni Moidev Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe. Nochen had to be meneis pashtos hamachla, how to not allow a disease, Rachmana litzlan, infectious disease, to spread. Nochen lilmud parshas haktoris and Pidish Rashi, to learn the Parsha Ktoris with Rashi.
It has to be on parchment, or it doesn't need to be on parchment?
No. Veloshin Idish zu verteitzen. That's the point, not the parchment. Zu verteitzen.
Well, what is this parchment?
I don't know. No, there is. I don't want to talk about the parchment. I don't want to talk about other gulas, which I happened to mention a few weeks ago, the parchment and the other gulas. But I just want to what the Alter Rebbe says. Well, why not? The Alter Rebbe is clearly not talking about parchment. Hainu, the number 1, 2, and 3 I put in. The rest is Loshen Harav. The Parshas Tetzava Minasisa Mizbeach Ad Hasoif. The Parshas Tisa, which is this week's Parsha, Pasuk Chav Beis at Soif Lamed Ches, which is a large amount of psukim. You might think it's 2-3 psukim. It's not just the few psukim we say in the morning, but it's many more psukim. And also, in other words, like in the beginning of the page, which is Moradachya, which is, by the way, Remes from Merdechai, like the Gemara says in Agila, Mordechai min HaTorah Minayim. So from this pasuk until the end of the parsha, ube parshas koirach parshas tezayin, me pasuk lamed aleph ad vad magefen netzora. That's number 1 with Rashi. Und zu verteitzen. Verteitzen means in today's Yiddish we say it. You understand exactly. You're not just saying words that are Kabbalah, but you're actually understanding what you're saying. Verteitzen in Yiddish. You know what's going on, you understand exactly what is going on. That's number 1. Then he says, Gam Kriyas Parsha Nal Shnayim Mikra Ve'echad Targum. To read this same Parsha is also Shnayim Mikra Ve'echad Targum. And then he says a person that could to learn in the Rambam Perek Gimel Hilchos Tamidim the Halacha is the way the Rambam describes it. Ula Harbez B'Tzdok. Okay.
So
and all the
so partial learn that's Pesukim daily.
he didn't. That's the interesting thing is he didn't go in daily or twice a day. You'll see soon. I'm going to have it from Rabbi Akiva Eiger who says some twice a day. No, Alter Rebbe doesn't go in if it's daily or weekly. He says to do it bebatik nesiyas, or if not in batik nesiyas, if it's not shaykh at home. I don't know if it's daily, but for sure not twice a day. It's not mashma that way. So, in the eights of the Alter Rebbe and Rabbi Akiva Eiger and that Tzemach Tzedek, in all three of them, I want to just look into a little bit of what the source might be. And the source of the Alter Rebbe for this is many places, but one is in the Zohar, which is obvious. Which is an obvious source. It's a moidedik Zohar, a story in the Zohar, which the Rebbe had kocht very much in the story, and 3 times, or maybe more even, the Rebbe gave a biur in this story. Okay, so the Zohar is in Vayera Kuf Aleph Aleph, Daf Kuf Aleph Amad Aleph. The Zohar says like this: Rabbi was traveling. He came to a place called Kfar Tarsha. Also, Lagabi Shpiza, literally called name also. Amru Gavre Rabba also Hoch. And Nezel Lagabe, also Lagabe Amru Lechasal Uvdana, Amru Mao, Amru the Ease Shivan Yom, the Shara Moisna Mimosa, V'chol Yomi is talk of Eloi's battle. 7 days already, people are dying. There's a pandemic, and it's not stopping. Omerlu, he said, we're going to go to the Beis HaKnesses and his boy Rachmi Min Kodem Kuchabrichu. We're going to ask Rachim the Eibishter. So Ada v'Azlu, as they were walking to shul, also Amru Ploini, Uploini Misu, Ploini, Uploini Notu Lamus. So they were coming out of the houses and saying, this one Rachmon al-Islan passed away, and this one almost passed away. Omerlu Rabacha Leis Ita Lekaima Hochi the Shaita Dechika. There's no time right now to go down. Time is we're pressed for time. Aval afrishu minechon arboim b'nei noshem inun. The zakon yater. Find me the most zakai people in the city. As you'll see later at the end of the story, that the city was not so there was not so ayayay. Asora la'arba chulkin. 10 people to each corner of the city. V'noi mochin. Asor lezavi is the Marsov, Asor lezavi the Marsov, Vayakhel-Pekudei bezavis the Marsov, ve'imru beruas nafshaychen inyon the ktoides busmen kuchabrichu yov laMoshe v'inyon the Kerboni. 10 people, a minion each corner of the city, and they should say the ktoides with the biggest kavana. Berusa the nafsh as much kavana the good, and also the korban. I don't know what it means in your korban. It could mean it means also the psukim v'sisim mizbeach, like the Alter Rebbe adds. That's what the Alter Rebbe adds, right? The sisim mizbeach. Okay. Avdu came klazim, and they did this 3 times. Va'aboru b'chol mosel arbezavi se va'avamen and came lebosar omel nezelin and the shitul nemes va'afrishu menaychen levateyo and v'imru kedein v'chatesai metemrel and ilun psukayet los zimin. You should go into the house all the people that were Rachmon al-Islan about to pass away. Say the Parshas HaKtoides, and then also say Vayom Moshe al Aaron Kachas Hamatcha v'sein ala eish v'goymer v'yikach Aaron v'goymer v'yamed ben Amesim v'goymer. That's in Korach. That's what I'm telling you. That's what the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe says to say 3 things. One is the Parshas HaKtoides, the way it's mentioned Kisisa, and also the way it's mentioned in Tetzaveh, which I understand. But then the third one is from Korach, the story of Ma'agef and the Tzorah, which we see over here. All 3 are mentioned l'choyre in the Zohar. All 3 are mentioned in the Zohar. Because in Parsha Tetzaveh it starts with Mizbeach, with Sisa Mizbeach. In Parshas Kisisa is obvious. That's the main Parsha Ktoides. And then in Korach is also V'tein Oleh Machta, V'tein Oleh Ktoides. That's where the Alter Rebbe got the 3 things. And then the Gemara, the Chazal, the Zohar says that he's heard from heaven that they're saying, "Oh, who's the guy thinking? Who is this Rebbe? What's going on over here?" So in heaven they're starting to say, "Who's this Rebbe? What's going on over here? This is not good." And he fell asleep, and they told him like this. Cholosh Libe, the Rabbi Admuch, he went to sleep. Shalma, the Omer Lekat, Avdes, Do, Ovedo. You did already this, do this. Zil ve'emaloin de Yachzer, B'tshuva, the Chayov, and Inen Kamoi. The Rebbe Shalom told him, never mind what the Bezdin Shemayla says. You did already one thing, you made them live. Beseder. Now make them do tshuva. Come v'achzer loim b'tshuva shleima v'kabel olai de lo yizbatlu me'iraisa la'olam v'chlifa shmo de karta v'kor loim maso machasya. So they were makabel that they're going to learn Torah, and they changed the name of the city to Marsov Machasya. Before I go to the Rebbe has a biur nifla. As a biur nifla, as I said, the Rebbe said 3 times the story and 3 times a biur, because his father, who had very few svarim b'mokum galusay. Even though his father wrote tons of Chidush Torah, and they were buried under his house, and after the Nazis came, and they were kennish gefon adayam hazeh. And the only Torah sham dali ba'av, the few svarim he had, including a Zohar Kodesh that he had when he was Nebuch so sick, and b'mokum agolus, but he wrote ha'oris in the side of that Zohar, and his wife managed to smuggle it out of Russia and bring it to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe, for many years, every Shabbos used to say over a shtickle Zohar with the beard of his father, and he said his father didn't have enough paper and didn't have enough ink. Kiyudu, his mother, Mesiris Nefesh, picked herbs and made ink. So mainly he expanded on his father's biur, not only Noises HaKabbalah, but also Noises of Avodas Hashem. The Rebbe told over the story, Ka'omar 3 times, to show you the importance of the story. And the Rebbe expanded on his father's biur. So I'm just going to give it the way it's together, the beard of the Rebbe plus his father, the way it goes together, the way it's negate to us, and Avodas Hashem. And before I start, I just want to say one thing that seems to me that the Rebbe doesn't say, but it seems the most, why the Rebbe so much kocht in the story. This is mamish the Rebbe's attitude. To help a Yid first. And then he'll do tshuva afterwards. To help the Yid first. Don't worry, he'll do tshuva. He'll do tshuva. First we'll save his life, and then he'll do tshuva. Okay. What's the Rebbe's biur? There's a lot of nekudas in Kabbalah, but as I said, what's negayah to us? The Rambam says that Baal Tshuva changes his name. Therefore, the first thing is they changed the name of the city. When they changed his name of the city, it wasn't only they changed the name. Later, he told them that's not good enough you have to live up to the name change. So what should they do? They should be kabel on themselves to learn Torah. What's the Geval of learning Torah? The name of the city? From Kfar Tarsha to Marsov Machasya. Why learning Torah? Because the Gemara says that mitzvah bidna the osik b'magina matzila bidna the lo osik b'aguna magna atzul leloy matzla. Torah bein bidna the osik b'bidna the loy osik b'magna umatzla. That mitzvahs protect you while you do it, and Torah protects you even when you don't do it. And the Tanya says that mitzvah is the higher level of Torah is the higher level of tshuva. So therefore, they needed to do the highest form of tshuva, and they needed a high level of protection. As kabel alayu, that they were makabel this thing, that there will be misasik be'erais. The lo yizbatlu me'erais el'olam. Okay. There will not be mevatlu me'erais. That's the first thing. Why did they change the name from Kfar Tarsha to Marsov Machasya? Unbelievable beer from the Rebbe. The Gemara says that the Be'emes, Yecheskel Hanovi and Yeshaya Hanovi saw exactly the same thing. The Gemara Chagiga Daf Yud Gimel. They saw exactly the same thing. But Yecheskel describes it Beraj Godel. And Yeshaya it's more like simple. The Gemara says, don't think that Yecheskel saw more. It's the opposite. It's a mashal of a ben kvar shiros hamelach or ben krach shiros hamelach. A peasant child never saw anything besides a tractor in his uncle's tractor. And so now they came to London, they saw Buckingham Palace, and they saw the guards and the whistle. Woo! Comes home and he describes it to his friends. He can't stop talking about it. But then the Ben Krach comes and sees a change in the guard. It's not so special. Yecheskel, to him, he was like a Ben Kvar. He was a peasant who saw everything he saw in the Makov he describes with colors. He's very descriptive about it. But to Yeshaya, he was sort of more Ben Krach. So right away they changed the name of the city from Kvar to Mosa. Mosa is a city which are close now that they're going to learn Torah. So they're going to be close. They're going to know the Eibishter in a closer way. Originally, the name of the city was Kfar Tarsha. Tarsha means a heavy rock, a strong rock. A rock is something that doesn't grow. Nothing can grow out of a rock. Machasya means protection. What is the protection? When a yid does mitzvah achas, koine loy prak letecha, tshuva ma'asim tovim ketris mipnei puronius. Same thing, Torah. So now instead of being kfar tasha, which is my paid mitzvahs that it doesn't grow because we're not learning Torah, we're not doing mitzvahs. Now there were Mosa Mechasya, they were a city which is Ben Karach, which sees the Eibishter, and they had Mechasya, they had the special protection. That's the Savachlolas, the changing names in about Tshuva, and Befrotas, the name they changed, showed and they.
Matya Mechasa?
Masa Mechasya, yeah.
It means
a city, Masya means city, Mechasya means protection. Masya means city.
That Matya is dead.
I think maybe New York has its own name.
Yeah, we should give New York a new name.
Maybe we should think about that.
Didn't they change already from New Amsterdam to New York? I guess if
After all, York in England was.
It's not good. Yerek is something good. And in general, the Rebbe says that the Chassidim said about the Alter Rebbe is Mechayim Esim, because Chassidus takes the brain, which is so cold and so calculated, and sees everything in such a cold scientific way, and asks that the brain should understand God's presence in a way that the person gets excited, and that's in Mechayim Esim. The person could be so angeton and lomdus and but the Yiddishkeit could be dead, Rahman al-Islam, could be kalt. And I had once a chaver, not in the Lubavitch Yeshiva, we learned together for many years, but he's a special person. I'm not, but he had his parents used to say for him for the weekend the thing in the New York Times, the science section in the New York Times.
Thursday.
Yeah, the science section in the New York Times, and Ba'is Yeshiva Taka, they used to get free of charge. They used to get every day as a pile, aside from the New York Times and aside from the Wall Street Journal. And okay, it's in the bathroom, it's a good thing, but from such a Torah, Rahman al-Islam, that could be the opposite of Tchiyas HaMeisim. When you learn Chassidus, it becomes Tchiyas HaMeisim. A Yid gets excited about the presence of the Rebbeinu Shalom. So Mamela, B'chatchila, by them it was Tarsha. Tarsha means it was a rock, like the Pasuk says, Leva Evan. And the Eibishter says, Vasiroise Leva Evan. I'm going to give you, like Tzvadim say, L'chaim. When they say L'chaim, they should say a Lev Basar. Why Lev Basar? Because the worst thing in the world that we want is a Lev Evan. The best thing in the world is to have a Lev Basar. So they changed it from Kvar Tarsha, that they're not Chas v'Shalom anymore, a place where they're cold. They're ungevarmt, they're ungevarmt Eifer.
Yochanan went to Tarshicha, no?
What?
Let's pass with some prayer.
Oh yeah?
With a Lev Basar.
Oh wow. Wow.
In Yochanan, he went to Tarshicha.
Tarshisha, yeah.
Tarshicha or Tarshicha?
Tarshisha. Okay. This is the Alter Rebbe's Eitzah. Okay, so we go from the settled Alter Rebbe to Rabbi Akiva Eiger. In the year 1831, this is in Chabad history, it's a short time after the Petita of the Mittler Rebbe. At that time, a large Rav Minyan of Bnei Yisrael was under the Russian rule, and Poland rebelled against Russia. And the aftermath of the war, even though they were successful, it was after a year-long war. There was hardly any commerce going on. There were a lot of Yidden here without Parnosa. And unfortunately, the machla of cholera started to spread all over Poland. It was a big ace tzora. Rabbi Akiva Eiger got very involved. Rabbi Akiva Eiger was the Rav of poison. He was originally in different kehilas in Germany, but I think at that point he was a Rav and Poizner. He got very involved. Yeah. Even now in Poland. And
they have a shul here, Pozna. I never knew why.
I'm not sure.
They do.
Yeah.
Yeah. I am Bedford.
Yeah. And then he even got a letter he got a letter from the king. They were now under the influence of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. They got a letter from the king praising him and thanking him for the measures he put in to save the Jewish community. Apparently, the Goyim saw it as a dugma chaya for what can be accomplished. And think about it, they really didn't have that much medicine. And the Rabbi Akiva Eiger used this letter at the end of a year-long battle against the disease. The resources in his community were like dried up. He made a special committee, and they collected stock from every yid. He said, what happened is people that were wealthy already, they lost a year of war, and now the machla, so this was going on for a while. He said people are ashamed to ask for help, and then they're eating not good foods, and apparently for that machla, that was terrible. One of the things was, he said, it's also to walk out of your house before you eat something in the morning. He had the whole things about eating smaller amounts, less, but more meals during the day. I mean, there's not negay for us today. I'm just describing what it was.
Sounds like my nutritionist.
Exactly. And not to overeat, but to stay very warm. These things are not negay for us today. So anyway, I'm going to quote here three. There's a sefer, Igris Rabbi Akiva Eiger, and there's three letters bekesher to this pandemic that in the days of Rabbi Akiva Eiger. So look at a little quote, a snippet from each one of the letters. One is to his Talmud Rabbi Elio Gutmacher. Kayadua, the Rabbi Elio went on to live a very long life. He was a Talmud Rabbi Akiva Eiger. He was a Rav in many Choshev cities. He later became a staunch supporter of the idea of Zionist movement. I'm not sure, and I don't know exactly if he was, because we're going back a very long time. He was Nifterech Tofresh Lamed Hey. So I'm not sure, before even the meeting of the first Congress of the Zionist Congress. So I'm not sure that his ideas of returning to Eretz Yisrael had a very strong resemblance, but I don't know. If you ask a Rav Kook person, he'll tell you about Rabbi Elio Gutmacher, that after Moshe Rabbeinu is Rabbi Elio Gutmacher, and then goes Rabbi Avram Yitzchak Kook. But anyway, he was a very big person, and Kayadua that he was always say Pella, and his broch, he used to give brochas to Yidden. So the Rabbi Akiva Eiger writes a letter to him, and he tells him about some of the measures that he put into his community. He says, that people should get together in a small area is not the right thing. It's possible to daven in smaller groups, about 15 people in each minyan. They should say Tehillim every morning, extra Tehillim, and every afternoon. And they should say the Yirotzen after the Tehillim, and they should also mention the king and his government. Why did Rabbi Akiva Eiger write that? Probably dual purpose. He knew his letters might be censored by the government, so this was a very important thing. Second thing is, in general, you see the Alter Rebbe too, and perhaps a third reason is be'emes that Rahman al-Islam, when there's no government, the first people to suffer are Jews. I mean, there's this Paul b'Shloim Meir, but Jews are usually the first one, when there is anarchy, the first ones to suffer. I mean, it's a pliyat summa, even now, that I'm totally disconnected. So I know the news. I don't even know the news from the mikveh, because. So now I know the news only that my wife tells me. But she told me that there was already posts from people in Westchester that the Jews, Rahman al-Islam. So everyone knows that the Jews don't live in China. I mean, there's a few shluchim in China. No Jews live in Wuhan. This machla started there a couple months ago, and we're not talking the Middle Ages. There's a print. Everyone's glued to the TV. They're from the TV alone. The people are getting sick from the TV, not from the actual machla. They're dying from fear. People, Rahman al-Islam, are getting sick from fear, and the information is obvious and clear to everyone. Yet there's already anti-Semitic voices, classical anti-Semitic voices. I mean, and think in a time when there was misinformation and no one knew.
The Jewish lawyer that they're saying, this the news, they said the Jewish lawyer, the Jewish Sheilos, and this is what they're talking about, the yeshivas.
Unbelievable. It's like, it's Rahman al-Islam. So the Rabbi Akiva Eiger wanted the Yidden should daven Shloi Malchus. Okay, I'm just saying, interesting. He said also you should say the Nusach Parshas HaKtoros every morning, every afternoon, but the way he says it doesn't sound like it's the Alter Rebbe, all sukkim from here and there. It sounds like it's more from whatever's in the Siddur with the Yirotzen that's there. V'locha shelo yitchuk anoshim yosem mesach hanal al yedei amiras shoiter mipolitzei. You have to realize that this was a very serious. We're not talking about what's going on in New York right now. I'm not. We'll talk practically what we need to do in a minute. But we're talking about that this was in the midst of an epidemic, which was spreading. So he says if people are not, more people are going to come to the minyanim, more than 15 or whatever it is, around 15. So they should have police that are watching at the door, not allowed.
Wow.
Person should be very careful in these days not to be atzvus. Why? Because the atzvus is not to be...
Chabad Boca, they sent out an email, West Boca, Rabbi Bookett Shul, that they'll open the shul 15 minutes before davening and cut it. In other words, whoever.
Okay, I thought you were going to tell me about the email that Harchi Kol Mine Atzvus. To be marchik very much to Atzvus. Shaloi leilach balayla ba'avir ayir. Not to walk at night in the city. Liftoch haloinas ba'boiker, to let him fresh air. V'lirchetz ba'zeh shachris ponov v'yodav, to wash your hands and face. L'zalav hakadorim eze pa'omim b'choimetz chozak, to disinfect the rooms with choimetz chozak. They didn't have disinfectants that we had.
They use a stale strong.
Oh yeah? Oh wow. Oh yeah? Interesting. Didn't change that much. Then there is a letter to Kehila Kadisha Berlin, Amsterdam, and London. He made a copy of the same letter for 3 communities. And he writes over there he needs funds to finish off the campaign in his community. He said he had free medicine for every person. Every Yid that Nebuch needed, they had the Kehila provided doctors, medicine and doctors for every Yid, free of charge. And he needs money because there was no more money. He writes a long letter, and in there he says, here, I'm showing you a letter, Michtav Toida, I'm just quoting word from Rabbi Akiva Eiger. Von 5. September 1831, Me'es Malkeinu, Simchas Libe Asher Nasa Poi B'Adeseinu, Im Ha'aniyim Ha'umlolim. The reason I'm quoting this is because you know that Rabbi Akiva Eiger from the Gemara and Rabbi Akiva Eiger in the Chidushim and Rabbi Akiva Eiger here and there, but you probably never bumped into such a, Michtav Toida from 5th September, these are his words, 1831, Me'es Malkeinu, Simchas Liba Shenasa Poi B'Adesenim Avnirim Lovin. Anyway, he was collecting funds. Number 3 is a general letter to other communities that were asking his advice on what to do. It was similar to the first 2 letters. He adds an interesting thing to say every day, Tamne Ape, to say the Tehillim, which has the Aleph Beis, Kuf Yutes and Tehillim. Chabad will be saying it daily in Mitzvah Hashem very soon from Yudal. And at the end of the letter, he says, Gami Zarti, and a long Lashonis Zhora. Oiver al Tziva Aroifim, Choytel Hashem Ma'oid, Higodel Sakanta Misura Befrat Lacherim. That a person is over on what the doctors are recommending is a big choyte, and the Gemara says in Chulun Dafyut Godel Sakanta Misura, and we see the Poskim are more machmer some things sakona than Isur, and the Mevatel Isur.
But politics now with Terem Masera.
Yeah.
All the doctors are saying to shut the schools, and Terem Masera is not.
Public schools are still open.
No.
Public schools are still open.
Befrat Lacherim. Befrat Chas V'Shalom, no one else should. So, as I said, I think for each one of these 3 Gdolei Yisrael, it's kedai to look in the sources, in the Chumash, in Tanakh, in the Gemara, and the Poskim to find where they said. To try to find for every Ois V'Koitz that Rabbi Akiva Eiger said here, we'll be sitting here till tomorrow morning. But I found a fascinating thing from Rabbi Akiva Eiger in Shulchan Aruch. From Rabbi Akiva Eiger in Shulchan Aruch, which you'll see is a source of something that he said. The Gemara in Baba Kama, Tana Rabbono, Dever Be'ir, if there's a Dever in the city, Kana Seraglecha, don't walk around the city. Shanem V'atem Lo Yiteitzu Ish Mepesach Beisa Ad Boiker, that the Yidden shouldn't go out of their house. There's another pasuk. It says, "Lech imi boich b'chadrecha v'sorg delasecha ba'decha." Chavide ga'ad yavezam. That's the end of the pasuk. V'omer, a third pasuk, mechutz l'shakel cherev v'chadorim ema. So, why do we need 3 psukim? It says, "V'hatam l'teitz ishim petzach beis admai." There was a pandemic in Mitzrayim, and people were dying. So the Abisha said, "Well, while there's a pandemic, don't go out." So what's it that said? What does it talk about? Why do we need another pasuk? Because over there it was only by night. How about by day? That not only by night, also by day. You're going to say that this is only when inside the house is safe. How about inside the house is also not so safe? So at least meet friends, it'll be a little more besimcha. No. That's why the third pasuk to say that still the person should stay home. That even though that chadorim is ema, but because mechutz to shakal cherev, you should stay in the room, in the house. Zog the Gemara Rabbi bidne ritzcha have a soccer kovi dechsiv ke'olam aves b'chalinenu. He would even close the windows. That nothing should come out from the outside into his house. Toner Rabbana deva beir al yahalach odem be'emtza derech. If there's a deva, you shouldn't walk in the middle of the road because the malach mavis is busy in the middle of the road. So you should try to walk on the side. Shalom beir faket al yahalach b'tzidei derachim, because he has the malach mavis has no rishus, so he's hiding b'tzidei derachim. So you don't want to bump into the malach mavis. Toner Rabbanon deva beir al yikonas adim yechidi lebeis hakneses. If there's a deva in the air, don't walk in yourself to the beis hakneses. Shom malach mavis mafket sham kelev.
Ooh, he's waiting for you.
No, he has his package, is at the shake case. He leaves it, he doesn't know where to leave it. He's not going to leave it somewhere in a guy's house. So he leaves it in a safe place in the basic Knesset. So he shouldn't go in himself there. If children are not learning there, and there's no minyan, but if children are learning there, the Malach HaMavos can't enter. There's a minyan, the Malach HaMavos can't enter. Shulchan Aruch brings like this, based on this Gemara. The Gemara says the Shulchan Aruch has Sima in Yeridei, Sima Kuf design all kinds of things that a person has to do in order to be careful for his health. As we said, Chamir Sakanta, Tzorech Leizoer, Militim Moaz Befiv, Shem Yeshalim Bereik Yov, Shel Mokeshchin. A person should always be careful not to put money in his mouth. Kitvonim Eili Yesh B'm Chashash Sakona. Oh, I'm just skipping now to the main part that the Ramah is saying. Oid Kos V'shesh Levrach Menir Keshedever Be'ir. The Gemara says if there's a dever be'ir, a person should try to escape the city. Yesh lotzes menir betchilas hadever v'loi b'soife. Cholel advarim heim mishum sakona v'shem nafshe yirchik mem v'osim machanes. It's also to rely on a nes. Oy l'sak nafshe b'chol kayoytze b'zeh. Rabbi Akiva Eiger stellt sich an this din Shulchan Aruch, and he writes b'sefer Rabbeinu b'chai Parshas Koirach u'ma shetzarech lo'mer bodlu v'akadosh baruch hu yesh b'yodoi. אלא כדי שלא ידבק בהם האוויר הרע שבמקס הדבר. אוי מטעם שומר הזל, כשמידס הדין מתוכן הם הפכים את צדק לראשו. Unbelievable. The Rabbi Akiva Eiger says that Rabbeinu Bechai asks, take. That Rabbi Akiva Eiger says, that Rabbi Bechai says, what do you mean? He bodlu metoich Eiger by Koirach. The Abisha said, go away from them. He says if 3 people are wrapped in one towel, and one smicha, and one sheet, and the Rebbeinu Shalom wants, he could take out the one on the right and the left. So why the Rebbeinu has to tell the bodlu metoich Eida? So he says the answer is that when there is a makas dever, there is something in the ear. There's droplets. There's something in the ear that travels around. That's killing the people. The Eibishter made a teva. That the dever means that there's a physical thing, something in the ear that's traveling in the ear. It's moving around in the ear. So the Eibishter said that therefore he bodlo metoicha eida azois v'achalo oisam kiroga. Go away from them because now there's going to be a dever, and the dever is a natural thing. And it's a germ, it travels in the ear, and therefore you can catch it. So therefore, you bodlu metoicha eida. And because of what we spoke about Shabbos, which is Mitzvah, so I did a search in the computer. So it took a little time, but I found the Rambam says that the tzaras is something spiritual. We don't know what it is. But Seforno writes that a Mitzvah bodet yeshes kivin shemachla medabekes. The reason he has to be quarantined is because it's a machla medabekes. That's what he writes. So what's a Seforna and the Rambam? You could make it into machloikis or whatever. Shivim panim latoira. There's pshat emes derush and both are true. And we're not passing halacha now, so both are relevant to us. So the other teretz that the Rabbeinu Machai gives is a spiritual teretz that midas medina metucha ein mafchem ein tzaddik l'rosha. I think these two answers that Rabbeinu Machai could apply to so many questions in Judaism. You can ask the same question so many places, and these two answers will apply. What's the nafkamina between the two answers? It's a huge nafkamina. The first nafkamina is the first answer is like saying that Chazal didn't know maybe what we know scientifically, things that were discovered in the 18th and 19th century, late 19th century even, about germs that weren't visible, but they had this notion that aside the Seforno Lamashal about the Tzaras, inside the Rabbeinu Machai, who lived hundreds of years ago, had this notion that to explain the Gemara or to explain the stories in Chumash about Tzaras or about David, the story of the Makas B'Chodesh, the story of the Gemara David B'Toich. They had this notion that there is something that's traveling in the air and you can't see it, and it might be on certain surfaces and you can't see it. And Ove, even by daytime, closed the windows of his house. He was scared it's going to travel into his house. This Inyan. So,
based on that, should we think there's a Charon Af in Shemayim?
I don't know. I don't know. Charon Af is beyond my payroll. But I could tell you what Rabbi Akiva says and what the Gemara says. And so, Lamaisa, how would I translate it to what's happening now? So, I don't think we have to be more, or at least a long shot, more careful than what the Roifim are saying. Therefore, Beis Menachem Mendel is open, and therefore we had even Shalosh Udas, and we're having now breakfast, because we don't have to be more careful with what the Roifim are saying. Maybe a little more careful.
It's not less than 100 people.
As I said, whatever the recommendations are, we have to do without chochmas. There is, this idea. Someone telling me that Rabbi Freundlich from China was saying that it's practical. Just make sure you come into the house and wash your hands with soap, tack in 20 seconds, and wash your face. And put your shoes by the door. It's a little bit of a difficult one, but in China, that's what they're doing.
But to put the shoes.
Yeah, and to wipe up surfaces, and all the things that are being recommended. I don't have to repeat because everyone knows it. And to do it without kunzen, not to be a cowboy and not to rely on this. For Shteitzach, we have to know that these things are but the emes, just like the Gemara says, that if there's a Beis HaKnesses that over there, the Dardaki are learning, or there's 10 people davening, the Malach HaMavos doesn't get his right to put down his attaché case there. So definitely, as long as there's no rule against what we're doing now from the Roifim, we'll keep on doing it. But whenever there'll be a rule from the Roifim, we'll follow it. As you see, Rabbi Akiva Eiger was. Could you imagine? In the city of Rabbi Akiva Eiger, there were shuls. There wasn't a shtiblach mentality back then. I'm sure the shuls back then were housing in the hundreds. And Rabbi Akiva Eiger said that there was a machla, so therefore they should make minyanim, and there should be erech tezvav anoshim, and they should be spread out. They shouldn't start it. Okay, so
some communities
whatever
they had backyard minyanim.
So that's but for Shteitzach, that just like in Rabbi Akiva Eiger, which took strong measures, that he said the iked is the ruchnis, the protection that we have. Now from the Tzemach Tzedek.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What's the definition of Dever? Because
we're not in that definition.
Right. Dever is tough showing where basically you get sick. There's a 50% chance.
No, the Gemara.
Typhus was Dever.
The Gemara has a very tight definition for dever, but also dever, the dever, it could have a larger definition. When Rabbi Akiva Eiger was talking about dever, or when the Shulchan Aruch over here was talking about dever, Lav Dafka is talking about that definition of city 500 people, 3 people are dying 3 days in a 3 days in a row. Dever has also a larger definition.
What did the Pshatim say what the mock of Dever was? What it involved?
Oh, we're not talking now about
We're
mock of
using the
dever.
same word.
We're using the same word, right?
Dever
Dever means
means
a plague, yeah, sickness. Tzemach Tzedek. There is a Tzemach Tzedek who writes. It was about typhus, and he wrote to be Moisev and Kavonas Habrachas. What's the connection? So the connection is very simple. The Alter Rebbe brings Shulchan Aruch and the Amei Brachas Shechayev Adam Lavorach Chol Yom V'Yom Erev Ad Boker K'ma Shetikon David Amalach Al Mashalom and the Ma'aser Shoyim Meisim B'Chol Yom Mei and the Pashas Yisrael. V'lo Yoydim Al Ma'im Meisim. They didn't know why these people were dying. At Shechokar V'Heivim Baruch HaKodesh V'Tikon Mei Brachas B'Chol Yom V'Remes L'Dova Numa Gever Hukum Oil. Oil, which is 70 plus 30 is gematria 100. V'samach l'dova min ha'toyer v'at Yisrael ma'ashem l'kecha shel mimach kim l'yira. S'Hashem l'kecha al tikra ma'al ha'meya. Emeya bracha shehem l'yira. S'Hashem l'aba yisrael l'zachim tamen. V'edei bracha shmevorach tamen. And V'meila, the dev stopped. This thing that the people were dying every day stopped through this takona brachas. So V'meila, the Tzemach Tzedek said that there should be moisif. He said other things, but I'm just saying this one thing. Sheyesh by mishum chidush. That a person should be moisev in kavonas habrachas. A person should be moisev in kavonas habrachas.
So typhus lasted so long.
I don't know if it was. I don't know where, what, when. I'm just. This is from.
Yeah, he's saying in the Tzemach Tzedek
Yeah,
times.
yeah.
No, he's saying from the Tzemach Tzedek all the way through World War II.
Yeah.
Typhus was going
No,
on.
it was on, it was off. It was something that they dealt with. So, just moisev, one thing that I see that people are sending around from many Rabbonim about talking and davening. I didn't find anything per se, from Tzemach Tzedek was Mefedish, such a thing, but we know in Tanya, the Alter Rebbe says Gewalt, Gewalt, so it's the only time the Alter Rebbe says something in Yiddish, and he says twice Gewalt, Gewalt, so in the middle of davening, someone walks over to me, an Eitzav HaShidduch. It's a but today it's very important. Shidduchim, everyone should be Shidduchim. But he was 1 inch away from my nose, and it was the middle of davening. So I said, please call me Motzei Shabbos. I'm still waiting for the phone call. So what I want to bring out is and I'm going to call this person, and I'm going to tell him, I'm waiting, I'm still waiting, because sometimes a person, like the Alter Rebbe says, it's chlish something, but if it's something that when you go home and you eat your cholent, you forget about, so then davening shouldn't be less. We have to understand why are we living? There could be 2 ways a person could think. We're alive in order to eat cholent, but in order to have cholent, the Rebbeinu Shalom gives it to us, so we have to daven to the Rebbeinu Shalom to give us cholent. Another way of thinking about life is that we have to daven, and through that we're misdabek from the Rebbeinu Shalom, and that's the tachlis briose brios kol ha'olamas is to make a dira b'tachtonim, to be megala Davish's presence everywhere. Elamai, when you're starving, you can't do it. Mamela esmen ashtikol chom. It's everyone understands which is the correct answer here. So b'meila, we're alive in order to daven. It's befrat if we're learning Chassidus, we know that the whole tachlis in life is to daven. So b'meila, what inyan, what erech is it to have a conversation about something? And I'm just saying, it's like Ashgocha Protas that came to me, that the best litmus test is, if it's important to talk about it right now, is if I should myself wait 1 or 2 times in this nakuda and wait after davening and see how important this nakuda is to me after I ate the cholent. After I ate the cholent, I'm tired and I want to go lie down because my head is splitting. So at that moment, do I want to talk about this, or do I just want to go to bed? So if I just want to go to bed, so also b'shas davening, it's not so important.
That's a good
The Rav mentioned